We'll pick them up as they came in. We were so busy talking that didn't work out so well. But we are beginning chapter 5 of Bava Metzia, and chapter 5 is going to begin to look at, not begin, but it's going to cover mostly the issue of interest, and interest in the financial sense of interest, or the topic of usury. Usury being when you inappropriately collect on a loan in ways that are prohibited. Now, this is all derived from the fact that in the Torah, it says very clearly that you cannot loan for interest to other Jews. And we're going to get into that in more detail in a later Mishnah, but I wanted to go ahead and use that as our start point, just to understand what is interest and why was the Torah prohibiting it, in order to understand why we're looking at all of these details. All right, so what is...
Could you tell me what Metzia means?
Huh?
Metzia.
Oh, the middle. So Bava is a gate, Metzia is the middle. So the middle gate. So you have Bava Kama, which is the first gate, Bava Metzia, the middle gate, and Bava Batra, which is the last gate. And these are the three Bavas. The three gates used to be just one volume, but it was sort of a massive volume of most of the legal tort civil legislation, and they said, you know what, let's make these a little more bite-sized. And so we're working on this middle part of the giant Bava collection. Maybe someday we'll go back and do the Kama and Batra, and we'll put the bookends on it. But this one I thought would be interesting and representative of many of the topics that you'll find in the Mishnah. Okay, so interest. What is it? Give me an example of loaning for interest.
Mortgage.
Okay, mortgage, but what happens in a mortgage?
You get, the bank buys you the house for you.
Okay.
Pays for it, and you pay them in installments.
Okay.
Plus interest.
Okay, so there are some key elements in what you said. I just want to unpack them. I want to buy a house today, right? So the main things that are happening for interest is you are, in the typical case, you are buying now and you pay later, right? That's the main structure, because when you pay later, you pay the original, I could tell that was wrong, original. You write the word 3 times and I can't even see if it's right anymore. The original plus, we're going to call it a bonus interest, right? So, and this works for everybody's advantage, right? At least ideally, right? I want to buy my house today. I can't afford to pay for my house today, but I'd like to live in my house today or tomorrow. It depends how long the paperwork takes. Usually more than one day in modern American real estate. I wish we had Natan here. He could tell us exactly. And in order for the person who has the money, a bank in this case, or an individual, if you have somebody who has that money, in order for them to help you, they will ask you to pay them back, not just what they loaned you, but some extra. Why? Why am I paying them a bonus? I mean, you gave me $5 for lunch yesterday. When I pay you back the $5 tomorrow, you don't ask me to pay you $6, right? You usually, at least it depends on your friendships, but most of the time, if you loan me $5 for lunch today, I'll pay you back just $5. Why is the bank being such, so mean?
Because it's a long term.
No, I think also it's because they won't do it for you next time. Why should I give you $5 and that's all I get back is $5? What's in it for me? Why would I want to do that? Maybe I need the $5, you don't pay back. So this way I ensure that if you want it again, I get some reward for giving it. It's like saying to the man in the grocery store, why don't you sell me the food for the amount you paid for it? Why are you taking an additional amount of money?
Right. But there's an additional labor that most people can see in the supermarket example of he's done something by bringing it closer to me or by putting it out for me to easily get, that I'm rewarding him for his labor. What labor am I rewarding this person for?
As the lender, it's the cost that I forego on other investments or other uses of that money.
Okay, so here's what we got coming from this, because you've all got elements of it. I want to tease these out. So one of them is the time, right? As as Erich was saying, it's, if I'm loaning this to you, it's going to be a while before I get this original back, and you need to compensate me for that time, which wraps in almost always with this question of my loss of use, right? While my money's with you, I don't get to use it. While it's doing your stuff, I don't get to use it, and I should be compensated for that loss of use. That's the work, to use the supermarket example, that I'm doing, is I am not doing work with the money that I could otherwise be doing with the money, right? So let's take not a bank, because banks are sort of faceless, but let's imagine you have somebody who lives next door to you, and they're doing quite well. They have extra $1,000, and $1,000 could buy you a house, or $1,000 they could buy some apples and sell to make $1,500. They got a good line on some cheap apples that they can sell with a good markup. Why should they choose to give you the $1,000 to buy your house and only just get $1,000 back later, when they could take that money and buy the apples and make $1,500? Right? You have to convince them that this is a worthwhile thing to do, and interest is the manner in which we convince people to loan us money, to give up that loss of use, to give it up for usually a significant period of time, and to therefore make things work. So fundamentally, this is important, Judaism understands that in an average situation, people wouldn't lend money without being compensated for it, right? That my money leaves my possession because it will do good for me, right? If I'm buying something, I'm leaving my possession because I expect to be compensated with a product. If I loan money, it's leaving my possession because I'm expecting more money to come back in its return. If I buy something because I plan to sell it, it's an investment, and I expect to get a return on that investment by selling my apples. But my money leaves me because it's going to benefit me. And that's perfectly normal and fine. So what does Judaism have against this? Right? It's perfectly normal and fine. Okay. So to understand, well, first of all, the rule. Second of all, I want to make sure we got that clear, because when we get to the passages that discuss that it's okay to lend on interest to non-Jews, it might seem very double standardish, right? And it might seem like, well, if this is so bad, why are we doing it to non-Jews? That's not the right way to think of it. Think of it as, if this is so normal, why are we not doing it within our own community? And why are we being so careful, as you're going to see, to avoid even hints of doing this within our community? That's the big question, is if this is normal, logical, sensible, why are we prohibited from doing it within our community? And much of it has to do with, well, what we have experienced as Jews, and what anybody who's ever loaned money to a friend has experienced, which is the loaning of money to someone, especially when there is an expectation of a profitable repayment, warps the relationship. It changes the dynamic among the people who are involved. It doesn't think, we don't think it should, we don't feel like it has to, and even if we're not expecting interest back, it can still have that flavor to it, right? Go loan someone $500, right? And see whether you and he or she relate to each other the same way until the money has been paid back.
I don't know if you listen to the radio, there's the financial advisor.
Mhm.
His expression for this is, if you loan money to family, Thanksgiving dinner tastes very different.
It's a very good way of putting it, right? So when, generally speaking, the rule of thumb should be, if you're loaning money to family or friends, don't loan any money that you can't afford to say goodbye to. Because if you are going to force it in all circumstances to come back to you, you're either going to say goodbye to the money or goodbye to the friend, or goodbye to the family member, who's not going to come to Thanksgiving next year because you were asking, where's my $400? Where's my $500? Where's my $500? And even if they owe it to you legitimately, everyone understands it's legitimate and there's no interest and no abuse at all, it's still going to make that relationship not so good. Imagine if you're charging interest. Right? Imagine instead of loaning $500 to your cousin to pay rent for that 1 month, you loan them $500 and say, it's okay, but it's going to be 5% interest compounded monthly. Or now imagine that Thanksgiving dinner, it's perfectly reasonable, right? I mean, I'm giving you $500, and that means I can't use my $500. I can't make it work for me in some other way. So I'm going to expect that you, as a reasonable person, would want to compensate me for my sacrifice. Because after all, this is a loan, not a gift. So, 5% seems fair to me. So pay up. But I'm thinking by looking around the room, yeah, that feels kind of wrong. If you were going to loan money to your family and not charge interest. I remember my first year in university. I was in the bookstore getting the stacks of books that cost a fortune. And I overheard two other students talking, and one of them said, yeah, it's so cool. My dad is paying for university and he's not even charging me interest. And that floored me. I mean, as someone who was having his own difficulties paying for university, I would have liked to have had one family member who could just write a check and cover the cost. But that he expected, that he was surprised and pleased that his father wasn't charging interest was surprising to me, or that his father would even expect him to pay him back, penny by penny for the university education, which I sort of had always assumed and still assume as a parent is kind of a parent's privilege and obligation, if they can afford to help the child into university, that they will help the child into university if it means the parent isn't driving as nice of a car or going on vacations.
But that's a parent and a child. If I lend my cousin $100 and I'm waiting 1 month and 2 months and 3 months and he's not paying back and there's no interest, that Thanksgiving dinner isn't going to be so nice either.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So
is the prohibition on interest to discourage any lending? Because otherwise it's just a matter of degree.
Okay, so excellent question. Because I was hoping we would see perfectly normal, except for friends and family, where it becomes abnormal or abysmal. But that means I won't loan to friends and family because it's so horrible. But then you recognize there are circumstances where you ought to. Not because, why not? $500, what's it between us? But because they're going to be evicted tomorrow. Now, I can't write off $500 because, my own bank account is, but they're going to get evicted. My brother is going to lose his house. It's all hypothetical, I hope you understand, right? He's going to lose his house. I need to help him. At least he knows, and I know, that I am doing this and I am foregoing all of this because I am doing it not as a business transaction, but as a form of community service, of support, right? That this is what I feel is the right thing to do to help a person in need. And it's within my means to help them with a loan, but it's not within my means to help them with just a blank check. And therefore, I am doing tzedakah in a particular way. And it's a way that doesn't impoverish me because I can't afford to be impoverished, but it does also prevent me from neglecting the needs of someone who really needs that loan by simply saying, I don't want to get involved. And so the Torah walks a tightrope. It says, don't charge interest among your fellow Jews, which is meant to be a byword for our extended family. But you should loan when they need it. And that was the general rule of thumb in the biblical text, right? In the biblical times, the general lifestyle was that no one needed a loan unless they were really on hard times, right? My crop failed. I don't have the money to buy the seed to replant my crop for the next year when I'm going to get my reward, reap the harvest, and then I can pay you back. But in the meantime, I'm dead if I don't get money to buy the seed to plant. Okay, so I'll loan you the money, right? Because otherwise you're going to starve to death. Loaning someone money to go buy an iPad never occurred to anyone. Loaning someone money in order to buy a boat, in order to become a sailor and a merchant, and then you'll pay me back on the purchase price of the boat. In the time of Moses, not happening. By the time the Mishnah rolled around, absolutely. Right. So finances and financial involvements. I wanted to say interests, but that just gets confusing. Financial dealings had become much more complicated, as we're going to see, by the time the Mishnah was being put together. And so the rabbis had to try and understand what this don't loan except without interest, and then really you're doing it mostly as almost like charity, how that was going to work when we had a more complicated mercantile, and in some cases international business dealings. How are we going to handle this? That the Mishnah rose to the challenge, and they came up with a good way of preserving exactly the Torah's intention and preventing the worst abuses, but also still allowing us to engage in commerce and not being stuck, living on a farm because we weren't able to raise capital for endeavors. Okay, so I know that was a long preamble, but it's a complicated subject, as we're going to find out in our first Mishnah. And then Harriet, our designated reader.
This is very complicated to understand.
All right, so that's how we're going to take it piece by piece, and the terms in bracket I'll chime in.
Because what is usury?
Right, neshech. Now, usury is usury in English means loaning on exorbitant interest, right? Loaning for too much interest. In Judaism, any interest in a loan in the Jewish community is usurious, right? Because no interest is permitted. So the translator decided that neshech would be translated as usury because it gets the right feel in English, but technically it's not the right word, because in English you can have regular loans and then you have usurious loans. In Judaism you have zero interest loans, and 0.1 and higher interest loans are usurious. So it's kind of misleading. So it's loaning on interest is the full word of neshech, but we'll call it usury just for the sake of brevity.
So what is usury and what is increase?
What is tarbit? Okay, tarbit, we're going to have to get to. Tarbit is another way of benefiting from a financial deal that smells of interest, but it's not exactly the same. I'm giving you 50 and you're giving me 55. There's a different way that I'm benefiting from our financial transaction, which feels usurious. I am increasing my income in a way that is potentially exploitative. And both of those are prohibited, but we're going to have to clarify what they are, because otherwise how we do business.
It is usury, neshech, when a man lends a selah for 5 denarii.
Right? I'm giving you 1 selah, and you're going to give me back 1 selah and 5 denarii. Right? That the denarii are the interest. Right? That's very straightforward. Boom, we've got it.
Now, instead of 5 denarii, it will be 2 se'in of wheat, or 2 se'in of wheat for 3.
Right. So I'll give you 2 bushels of wheat today. You give me back 3 bushels of wheat later. Right? That's hopefully very clear as an interest loan. Right? I'm giving you something now, right? And you're going to pay me later, and you're giving me back the original plus a bonus. That's our basic definition.
But he bites off too much.
Right. So noshech is the way they're making a play on words of why do we use the word neshech? Because you are biting more than you should. Right? You should be biting exactly what you gave, but you're biting more than you gave. Right? So it's you're taking too big a bite. Make sense?
It looks like nashes. Nashes off too much.
What's that?
He's nashing more than he can.
It actually, I don't know Yiddish well enough, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's a have a bite, have a nash. I makes you bet it's the same root, yeah.
Yes.
So
So
yeah, Yiddish.
Yeah.
You don't nash on my interest, right?
Who knew Yiddish came from Talmud?
Yo, lots of places.
Wow.
Okay, so let's get to our tarbit then.
Okay, so what is increase?
Now, that's the tarbit, right?
When a man increases his gains by selling produce.
All right, that doesn't sound too clear, so we're going to need an example. Yeah, here we go.
If one bought wheat at a golden dinar, which is equal to 25 silver denarii, for a cord, when such was the market price, and then wheat rose to 30 silver denarii per cord.
All right.
He bought it for 25 and it rose to 30.
Okay, so we have to understand a couple of things that are happening here. We're going to call him Reuben. We're going to call him Shmuel. He gets about 2. Right, so Reuben wants to buy wheat. Right? So he makes a deal. Right, we're going to make a little deal. of 1 core for 25 dinar. Don't worry about the gold versus silver and all that weird, 25 makes 1 and silly math. But he hasn't yet taken ownership of it. Right? They made the deal that he's going to purchase the wheat for 25 dinar. In the meantime, the price of wheat goes up to 30 dinar before the transaction has been completed, right? Before the wheat has been delivered. We okay so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Onward.
If he said to him,
That is to say, if Reuben said to Shimon, or Shmuel, or whatever, Shimon we'll call him, yeah.
give me my wheat, since I would sell it and buy wine with the proceeds.
Right? So Reuben says, all right, you know what? I want my wheat now because it's worth 30. And that means I'll be able to sell it for 30, and then I can buy wine. Right? So it's 1, price goes up. I guess 3 would be sell, and 4 would be buy the wine.
And he's probably saying he could buy the wine with the profit, with the increased
I mean,
price.
he's definitely made a good deal here, right? Because he bought 25 dinariums worth. He bought a core of wheat for 25 dinarium. It's now worth 30. So
Big fun.
deliver the wheat to me so I can go out and sell it because the market is my favor, right? And then when I sell it, I'm going to buy wine. So it's perfectly normal business.
This is the
Called arbitrage.
It's called arbitrage, right? Very normal business. And so far, there's no problem, right? So far in all of this, up to this point, it's all A-okay. Okay,
and
here's,
we're defining increase.
right, so we're going to get to where it breaks, and that will be the tarbit. That's the increase that was unlawful.
If he said to him, give me my wheat, since I would sell it and buy wine with the proceeds. And the other said,
Shimon, right?
let your wheat be reckoned with me at 30 dinarim, and now you have a claim on me for wine to that value, although the creditor has no wine.
Right, so the creditor turns to him and says, tell you what I'm going to do, right? You can consider your wheat to be now valued as 30 while it's in my possession, and I'll give you 30 denarii worth of wine instead. I'll go and buy 30 denarii worth of wine, and I'll give it to you. So basically, Shimon is buying back Reuben's option on the wheat for the current market value, with the understanding that he will run out and buy the wine and return it to Reuben for the 30 denarii worth. Everyone follow how that works?
Yeah, but I don't know how Shimon benefits from that.
Yeah.
So how does Shimon benefit from that? Well, Shimon benefits from that. Why Shimon might want to do that is he may have a good line on wine.
Oh.
Maybe you gotta cheat.
Right? Maybe he's got a,
Right.
maybe he can give 30 denarii worth of wine, but it only costs, Shimon 10 to get the wine. And so he's now benefited from that arrangement. And Reuben has also benefited from the arrangement. And this would be considered perfectly normal business practices in the modern world. A little complicated, but trust me, there's a lot more complicated things going on in the commodities markets all the time. But there is a problem here. And to get the problem, because this is complicated, if you look in the explanation at the bottom, they explain it with our description in a little bit more detail, and it's nice to read along. So in other words, if you can pick up, it's like in the middle, on the right-hand side, the middle line. Yeah, Shimon says to Reuben that he will sell him wine in return for the wheat that he owes him. That's what we already discussed. In other words, Shimon promises to provide Reuben with 30 dinar worth of wine, since that is the current value of the wheat. If Shimon does not currently have the wine in his possession, this is forbidden. Why? The reason is that if the price of wine goes up, Reuben will have, in effect, loaned Shimon 30 dinarim, the amount of wheat that Shimon owes Reuben, and when he gets the wine that has gone up in price, he will have received back more than he loaned. Does that make sense? Maybe. So Reuben just made a deal to buy wine that he doesn't own yet at 30 dinarim, but the problem is Reuben can take that promise, go out and buy the wine, bring it back, and just like the price of wheat went up, the price of wine might have gone up. And because it wasn't yet in Shimon's purchase, he was essentially investing 30 denarii with with Shimon, and Shimon is now paying back 35 denarii worth of wine. which is great for Reuben because he was guaranteed at least 30 denarim worth, but he's now getting more than he originally bargained for. Right? He is benefiting through that increase that is happening in this transaction. And it doesn't necessarily matter that it's at Shimon's expense. What matters is that it was an increase that did not come from his own action, his own participation, and as we're going to see later, his own risk. One of the ways that Jewish law eventually gets around many of these issues is by the notion of sharing the risk. Right. So if I'm a venture capitalist, there are ways to do that as long as we have a shared risk in what the venture is. Whereas if you take all the risk and we split the profits, and I'm compensated whether we win or lose, that is a loan on interest. That is not an investment of a partner. But we're going to get to that when we move on.
Have you just tossed out the entire stock market, the New York Stock Market? That was my question.
Okay.
Right?
No. So the reason why this does not apply to most modern forms of buying and selling is for exactly the reason I was just describing, which is when you are buying a share of a company, you are a partner in the company. You are a shareholder. That's literally what it means. Where this does have some issues in the modern world is on the issue of futures trading.
Options.
Right, options and futures and things like that. That's where it gets cloudier. And again, within an all-Jewish community, that's pretty much, we're probably not supposed to be doing that. Like I said, it's complicated because we're going to see there are ways that you can do things that kind of benefit the loaner, but are okay. But there are also lots of things you can't do. But the modern stock market and even most modern commodity trading, where you're actually, I bought this and now I'm selling this, that's fine. And for shares, again, even if you consider the share just a commodity, I bought the share at 5, now it's worth 10, I'm okay. It's only where you're sticking someone else with the risk and you're getting the benefit, where essentially you loaned them the money and you get paid off the increase. That's where the interest problem kicks in. And this is basically saying that even a hidden loan, not hidden deliberately, but it's built into this arrangement almost by accident, is still subject to this prohibition. All right, let's get a few more examples as we plow on. Now you can see why I wanted everyone to be here when we started.
Oh, yes. Mishnah 2.
Mishnah 2.
One who lends money to his fellow may not dwell in his courtyard for free or rent it from him at a reduced rate, since that counts as usury.
All right, so let's go back to our Shimon and Reuben. All right, so this time Reuben has lent 50 shekels, right? He lent Shimon 50 shekels. And the next day he says, you got a really nice house and this courtyard, and I noticed you've got a room for rent in this courtyard. I was looking for a place here in Tiberias to come sometimes. How about I give you half what the current market value is of the rental? Doesn't work, because there was an outstanding debt between them. Any benefit that Reuben gains that is exceptional, that is different than just a normal other transaction, is considered interest. Right? So interest is not only paid back in cash. Right? That's the usual prohibition, is if you pay it back in cash, that's the sign of a shekel for those, or at least my sign for a shekel. If you pay it back in cash, right, that's not allowed. But if you pay it back in kind, it's not allowed. If you pay it back in services, it's not allowed. And that's what this Mishnah is trying to tell us, is that getting a free room because you loaned someone money, not allowed. Getting a discount room because you loaned money, not allowed.
Well, if I lend you money, you might feel obligated, even though you couldn't afford to give me that free room.
Exactly right.
The obligation, so that would be holding something over your head. I can see how that might not be considered fair.
Oh, well, it's definitely not considered fair. I mean, not only does it create an unfair expectation, but it is definitely me profiting. Profiting?
Not profiteering.
No, not profiting. It's me profiting from having loaned you the money. And that is the primary prohibition in Leviticus of not giving people loans, right? You are not supposed to loan for interest. You're not supposed to profit because you gave a loan, because as we said, within the community, you should really only be giving loans at 0 interest because you should be doing it to help people. And if you're helping someone, how dare you get some benefit back from it other than just the satisfaction of knowing that you've helped someone, up to and including a room or any other favors that someone else might give. All right, but
one may increase rent charge not paid in advance, but not purchase price not paid in advance.
okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean? How so? Go ahead and read the examples. It'll make a lot more sense.
If his fellow rented him his courtyard and said to him, if you pay me now, the cost is 10 sela'im per year. But if you pay me on a monthly basis, the rent is 1 selah per month. This is permitted.
All right, sound familiar?
Instead of 12 sela'im, you only have to pay me 10 if
Exactly.
you pay the whole thing at the beginning.
How often do you see this on contracts, right?
Yeah, right.
You can pay your cable provider, pay a year in advance, or you can pay it month by month, but the month by month fee is going to be a little more than if you pay it all at once. That's allowed, right? Paying all at once for a rental, as opposed to stretching it out, even though I'm benefiting by paying it at once, in the sense that I'm gaining by paying it now, that's considered permissible. On the other hand, let's make sure we get the opposite on the table so we can see the contrast.
If he sold him his field and said to him, if you pay me now, it's yours for 1,000 zuz, but if you pay me at the time of threshing, it will be 1,200 zuz, it is forbidden.
Right. On the other hand, if you are essentially penalizing the purchase price of something that is going to be coming later, that is not considered permissible, because that 1,200 zuz after the year, or the threshing time rather, that would be considered to have gathered interest in that time. Right? Monthly rent is expected, and so paying in advance is exceptional, whereas paying on time for a purchase is expected, and delaying payment is exceptional. And therefore you are gaining interest by delaying in an exceptional manner the normal way that purchase prices are handled. Right, does that distinction make some sense?
What is the time of threshing? I don't understand that.
Threshing would be like when you finish the harvest and you're taking and smashing open the wheat and gathering all the food. Right, so I mean, you could also just put the word 6 months from now. That would also be fine. But it would be expected at the time of threshing that you have more money because you've just got the harvest in, so you've made a lot of money off the field. So it's basically, you can pay me now, or when you get more money, you can pay me more. That's a form of increase. Make sense? Ish, maybe. I know not a lot of us may think of this in our daily life, but we're doing some forms of these more often than you think. Okay, let's get another example.
Is that about Mishnah 3?
Mishnah 3.
Okay. If a man sold a field and the buyer gave him part of the price, and he said to the buyer, pay me the rest of the price whenever you wish, and then take what is yours. This is forbidden.
All right, this is the layaway plan, right? But it's the layaway plan for a field, and that's going to be important, right? So I say, oh, you know what? You're going to buy the field, make a down payment on the field now, and I'll keep it in the meantime. And when you can finish paying me, then you can have the field. What happens to the field in the meantime? It's still mine, and I'm still getting use of it, which means I am benefiting from the delay in your payment because I still get to enjoy the use of the field. That is essentially giving me a benefit by loaning you that time, that money, essentially, in the meantime for you to pay me. And that's a problem, right? Even though you might think, well, who's getting hurt? All we're doing is securing the transaction, and then, that's fine. Yes, but how much more does the temptation become to create circumstances precisely like this? So in addition to the money I'm receiving to the field, I also get additional time for the using of the field, which means I am now gaining interest in this transaction. And that becomes the incentive then. Because as we all agreed at the very beginning, it is perfectly right and natural that a person would want to make money on every deal they do. I mean, that's what we do. That's how humans live. Everybody should, and it doesn't always mean that someone else is being hurt when you're making money on a deal. They're getting what they want, you get what you want, and everybody should be happy. But if you're doing that in a way that is exploiting this interest gap, if you're gaining illegitimately because of this interest, then that is what the Torah told us not to do when working within our own community. Make sense? Okay, again, it doesn't mean that doing that outside of the community is a morally problematic thing. I mean, yes, there are certain issues where when you charge too much interest for something, or you compound it, or the terms are not properly made clear, many of the issues with modern payday loan lending institutions are succumb to that, where it's like 1,000% interest. It's really quite abysmal and horrible. Then yes, that becomes a moral problem as well. But regular loaning for interest is considered to be perfectly fine. It's just within the community, we are given this special exception that says, but not amongst friends and family. And friends and family should be the entire nation of Israel, the entire Jewish people. All right, another example.
If a man lent another money on the security of his field and said to him, if you do not pay me within 3 years, it will be mine, then it becomes his.
Right, go ahead and read the A.
This is what Bophus, the son of Zunan, used to do with the consent of the sages.
Right. Collateral is okay, right? Collateral is fine. If I say, here's $500, and if you don't pay me back in 3 years, this field becomes my property, right? I have essentially pre-purchased the field through the loan, and you might think that was a bit of a problem, that the other person was enjoying the use of the field during the 3 years that they were waiting to repay me. But that's not a problem. That's just what's known as collateral. And the field is not being purchased with that initial $500, and therefore the other person isn't enjoying an inappropriate interest benefit from the possession of the field during the 3 years.
If I give you $500,
Thank you.
Yes.
and say if you don't pay me back, it becomes mine. What if the field is worth $5,000?
So remember when we had the discussion in previous, maybe it was last week, maybe the week before, about the issue of land not being subject to the laws of defrauding of price. If you agree it's worth 500, and I agree it's worth 500, it's worth 500 when it comes to land.
So that 1/6
doesn't apply, right? That doesn't apply to land. But you're absolutely right for other things. That could be an issue. But if the more wise thing to do would be to say, I'll secure this $500 loan with your $50,000 piece of land, would be to say, no,
Right.
no,
Okay.
I'm not doing that deal. I'm not signing on that contract. But if you want to secure my loan with a $500 piece of property, or if you want to give me $50,000 and secure it with a $50,000 piece of property, then I'll sign that document. But if everybody agrees that it's 500 and 500 is fair, then for land that is fair.
I have a little problem with the first one.
Yes.
That you sold the field to somebody, and
Right.
the buyer gave him part of the price. The seller, by using the field, I think it's compensating for not having all the money from the buyer.
Exactly, but that's what all interest is.
Yeah.
No, but I mean that's why interest in general is okay.
Yeah.
But why interest among friends and family is not, right? Because you are right. You are compensating it, but the loan that you give to another person within your circle is supposed to be a loan because of the connection, the community connection, and so I don't need to be compensated because I'm doing something good for you. And what the rabbis were very worried about was precisely when we became more commercial, when people were no longer, only farmers and only shepherds, but business got a little more complicated, and I could actually buy a piece of land here and rent a courtyard there, and sell sheep in a different country, and I could sell them to the local merchant who would take them on the boat, and then I get a share of the profit. When it got more complicated, the rabbis wanted to go, okay, what do we allow of this new type of business stuff? And what do we say, no. That's still compensation, which is interest. And what is and isn't okay.
Okay, so number one is okay for non-Jews,
Correct.
but not for Jewish people.
Exactly, because number one is basically just
I
a
think
way
this
of,
is what I didn't understand.
number one is basically just a way of collecting interest, as you
Yeah.
put it, being compensated
Yeah.
for the fact that I don't have my money yet. That's what interest is. And that within the community is not allowed.
Not allowed.
It doesn't make it a horrible, terrible, evil thing, but within the community, yeah, it would be a problem. And therefore, we don't. All right, shall we see if we can get Mishnah 4 in? Don't worry, we go to a new topic in chapter 5. Chapter 6. We actually get to a lot more of the rules on dealing with workers' rights and employers' rights.
Okay, Mishnah 4. One may not set up a shopkeeper on the condition of receiving half the profit, or give him the money to buy produce on the condition of receiving half the profit, unless he pays him his wage as a laborer.
Okay, so here's where we get into venture capitalists, except here it's venture capitalists in the Apple industry. And I don't mean Apple products, I mean, sorry, these are the fruit that hang off trees. I don't know if I can illustrate this better or just try and explain it. Let me try words, and we'll go to diagram if necessary. So Reuben and Shimon, they decide they're going to come up with a deal. It's going to erase that because it's not relevant. Shimon's got time, and he's a good worker, and he's a good salesman. Reuben's got money, but he's not such a good worker or a good salesman. And in our modern society, we'd say, great. Reuben gives the capital to Shimon. Shimon goes out and does it. And then the two of them share the profits, right? That sounds like no problem at all, except because Reuben is going to be benefiting 50-50 or in whatever agreement of the profits, he is essentially receiving interest in addition to being paid back the loan that he gave to Shimon to make that initial purchase of the goods or the goods themselves. And that's where the interest comes in, right? So maybe I do need to put some numbers up here, right? I'm going to use dollars because I can just draw quicker. I'm going to give you $100 to go out and buy some apples and sell them on the street, right? That's my big business. I'm going to get rich like this. I'm going to give you $100 to go buy the apples. So that is the loan. And then you're going to sell them for $500 because you are the best apple salesman ever, right? So when it comes back, I'm going to get my $250 profit, and I'm going to get my $100 loan back, right? Giving me $350, and you get $150 to keep for yourself, right? That's our share. That's our split. Did I get the math wrong?
No, I think you did it
No,
right. You gave him
250,
$100.
100, 250. Yeah, that's 500.
$500. He's
500
back
profit.
Yeah.
He sold the apples for, not profit, he sold the apples for $500. I used the word profit. I shouldn't have said profit.
Why isn't Shimon getting 200?
Why isn't Shimon getting
I paid
200?
back the 100,
Yeah,
that leaves
you
me
pay-
400 in profit.
For 400, the
Ah.
400 should be split.
Right. So either way it could work. Right. Either way it could work. Of either.
Oh, I see, you did it first. You
Right. I took the profit first, and indeed that would be a common arrangement, which is we'll share the proceeds, we'll share the sale. And I'm not going to raise it. I'm too lazy. But you could have also arranged after I pay you back the $100, then we share what's left. That would also work. But oftentimes the investor would want to skim the top.
Okay.
Right? There's 50 more bucks, right? So why not? And if you're willing to agree to it, that's fine. So essentially this profit, my pen's dying, this profit looks an awful lot like interest on the loan. Because I gave you 100 and you gave me back 350. And I understand that you got the extra money by working for it, but doesn't that just mean my money is I'm being compensated for my use of my money, right? That's interest. And we can call this a business arrangement, but basically my money is making me money. And that's what loaning is all about. And that is not allowed. Now, there are
allowed in between Jews.
Yeah, within the
That's
community, right, within the community. But if I pay you a wage, then it's okay. right? Because if you are now my employee and there is profit sharing for my workers, then now I have paid you to go do work and I can benefit from the work that you do. The same way that if I pay someone $50 to go work in my orchard and pick apples, I can say, I'll pay you $50 and I'll pay you half of whatever you pick. That's a perfectly legitimate arrangement because I have made you an employee and then we have an additional sharing on top of that. Underlying all of this is something that we're going to get, not to today, but we're going to get to eventually, which is the notion that lose my $100, then it could be a permissible arrangement, right? If I have a stake in what happens, then when it goes belly up, I lose that stake. Then it's not a loan. But here we're talking about a loan, which means, let's say, alternatively, Shimon goes out and he's not the apple seller he thought he was. And he takes my $100 worth of apples and he goes out to the street corner and he sells them for $50. That's all he can make off my apples before they go rotten. He still owes me $100.
Yeah, the loan.
He owes me the loan, right? That is why this is interest on a loan, not a dividend on an investment. Does that make a distinction make sense, right? If I give you $50 and I say, whatever you can make of this $50 we'll share and whatever you lose, we'll share. That is an investment in the modern sense of the word. But if I say, I'm going to loan you $50 or $100 and we're going to split whatever you make off of it. And if you make zero, you still owe me $100. That's not an investment. That's a loan. And it's just a loan with a novel way of getting the interest. Rather than saying 5%, 10%, it's half of the profits. But it is still a loan and I'm still getting paid back that 100 no matter what. And that means it's interest.
My problem?
Yes?
My head is like mud.
Well, of course.
It's hard to digest it, let's say.
So like I said at the very beginning, one of the ways to try and keep this straight of why the Torah would say, no, what's the problem, is don't say Reuben and Shimon, say me and my brother, right? Me and my cousin. Am I going to help my cousin get started in a business? All right. You want to be an apple seller? You know, my nephew, you want to be an apple seller? I've got some money. I can make you an apple seller. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to loan you $1,000 to go out and be an apple seller. Now, that loan is a loan, which means whether you sell or not, I expect that $1,000 back. But whatever you make off of it, we're going to split that, in addition to you paying me back the $1,000.
That's no.
But well, do you think so? To a nephew?
No.
Come on, your nephew, you're going to make him pay back the money and pay back the profits?
Not pay back the money, the loan maybe.
You'd expect the loan back, but would you expect a share of the profits for the work you did not do? You're not out there selling apples. You're not on the street corner.
But
right?
giving the nephew a chance.
Exactly, and that's the goodness.
Yeah.
And that's the kindness. Why should you be compensated with interest for doing a kind thing? When you give tzedakah to a beggar, do you expect the beggar to come back a year later and give you more? No. Right? You have to realize that within the community, the prime example that the rabbis were used to working with, and that the Torah had in mind primarily when it first was talking of this, is a case where you are trying to help someone, not where you are trying to make your money work for you.
Yeah.
And the Torah was very aware, and says it in a few different places, that people are going to begrudge this. They're not going to want to give away their money and only get back their money. And they're going to have to force themselves by remembering this is what God has commanded us to do, to help people who need this assistance. Because it's a mitzvah, exactly. And that's why restrictions on this feel uncomfortable, because we want to be compensated for our loss of time, our loss of use of the money, and all those reasons why interest makes perfect sense in a regular financial situation. Because we shouldn't be treating our close family and friends, which Torah believes is everyone, as a business opportunity.
That applies to the lender. Now, if Shimon goes to the First National Bank of wherever and makes that arrangement, is that okay with Shimon?
Provided the First National Bank isn't the First National Bank of only Jews.
Correct. It's not. It's
correct. And that's so Shimon can borrow from non-Jews or can borrow from a mixed institution whose money is not clearly designated as one or the other, which is why Jews generally rule that it's okay to be a shareholder in a bank, even though you know the bank is at some point likely to be lending to a Jewish person in ways that if it was just two Jewish people would not be permitted, because it's a legal construct that puts a barrier between yourself and the other person. And it's not a direct, I'm lending him. It's I'm giving money to the bank's paying me a benefit, and the bank is turning around and doing its own thing that I have no control over.
That's also the Bank of China in Israel, isn't it?
What's that?
I think I saw the Bank of China.
Probably. I mean,
Israel.
Israel is a major financial player, so I would expect.
And we can deal with them because clearly they're not Jews. It's okay.
And I would expect most of the major countries to have banks and branches and such in Israel.
Yes,
Maybe not on every street corner, but definitely in Tel Aviv. All right, let's see if we can't just finish off Mishnah 4.
One may not set out his hens for another to raise them and hatch their eggs in order to share the profits, nor evaluate calves or foals and give them to his fellow to raise in order to share the profit, unless he pays him a wage for his labor and cost of the food.
All right, so again, it's not produce, it's actual livestock, and the same rule applies, which is I'm going to give you the materials and you're going to make it grow, and then you're going to pay me back, and then you're going to share the profits with me. No, not like that. You've got to make him a laborer, and then you can work out some sort of benefits, profit sharing or whatever.
And you have to pay his cost.
But you have to pay a salary.
Not only a salary, but the cost of the food that he has to feed these animals.
Yes, exactly.
You do that as well.
Right, because they're technically your animals that are being raised here. All right, now part 3 of Mishnah 4, a little different.
But one may receive the care of calves and foals in return for half the profits, and rear them until they reach a third of their growth, and donkeys until they can carry a burden. All
right, so in this case, right, it is okay for Shimon to take care of these animals and return them, because he is not responsible for them until they are grown and on the auction block, right? So the risk for Reuben is still 100%, right? I'm going to take care of them for you, and then you can sell them and we'll share the profits. There's no loan being involved here, right? My work is being paid for by my caring for them. But in the meantime, I'm not on the hook for these animals, right? I didn't borrow 50 cows from you. I am shepherding or herding 50 cows for you. And therefore, you're still, Reuben, the owner of those cows. And as we talked about in the whole guardian issues before, if something happens to those cows and it's not my fault, I'm not. It's your problem, Reuben, not mine. Now, I'm not going to want that to happen, of course, because I want to share in the profits when they get sold, and I don't want them dying of meteor strikes or whatnot. But it's still your cow in the meantime, and this is just a regular sort of profit sharing for compensating me for the work. And I was not loaned anything in this process. If anything, it would be kind of like I loaned my work against the future payoff. But that's what every worker does. Right? That's what it means to have a salary. It's I'm working today, and the idea that you're going to pay me tomorrow or pay me next week or pay me at the end of the month. Right? We don't usually demand money before we come to work. We get paid after we do the work. Make sense? Okay. We will pick it up with Mishnah 5 next week. Hanukkah Sameach, Happy Secular New Year, all that good stuff.